Hi, I'm Lorraine Tate, and I have what they now become called an Osteomate um, back in August of this year. Now, I want to walk you through a bit of my journey as to how I came to this, and if it helps just one person, then that's great. Now, back in 2004, I went to a wedding in Mauritius. And it was absolutely wonderful. Came back from there, didn't have any problems at all. And then in the February of 2005, I went to India on holiday. It was off to Goa. It was absolutely beautiful. One of the best holidays I had, but I've had many since. But when I returned, it was almost like they'd say Delhi belly, but it wasn't. Um, So I went to the hospital. I was referred to the hospital by my GP, and at first he thought I had colon cancer. But thankfully it turned out back then that I didn't. But then they were looking into thinking that perhaps I'd picked up some sort of parasite or something. So I was put on lots of medications, mesalazine being the main kind of medication that I have, and that kept me really, really well for many, many years. In 2008, I had my daughter Lexi. She's now 12. Um, and everything had been ticking along pretty okay, actually. In 2009, I started a law degree, no problems, absolutely fine. And then in 2013, I signed on to do the LPC, and I started to get a little bit unwell again, and I was having what they would call a flare. So I spoke to my IBD nurse, and she called me in, checked me over, gave me some steroids, and some other bits and bobs. Off I went, and happy days, it cleared up again. Then I ticked along quite nicely, really, until about 2017, I think it was. I had another flare again. Again, same treatment, absolutely fine, no problems whatsoever. Then in July of 2018, but I think it's 2019, I had some liver function tests and lots of other tests, and it came back abnormal. I saw a registrar, a locum, at my normal gastroenterology appointment, and she immediately sent me for an ultrasound scan, which I went to. Then within a week, she'd sent me for an MRI, and then that was on a Saturday. I went for an MRI in 2019, and she literally phoned me on the Monday and said, "This isn't good news. I want you to go for a CT scan." So on the Tuesday, sorry, I was then having a CT scan. And it turned out I had 6, what they call adenoma tumours on my liver. Now, I was all set and booked for a biopsy, and then she sent me for another scan again. So I went for another scan, and then was told that they couldn't do a biopsy because these tumours had a very healthy blood supply, and it'd be too dangerous for me to have the tumours, but what they wanted to do was sit and watch them. So a few months later, I had another scan, and they were growing, and what they thought was my own hormones were actually feeding these tumours. So they planned for a hysterectomy. Anyway, long story short, it was almost like a year later. So my hysterectomy was booked for the 27th of July this year. So they monitored these tumours for a year. However, on the 13th of July of this year, I didn't didn't feel great. I felt a bit poorly. So I phoned the IBD nurse and I said, I think I'm having a little bit of a flare. So with that, she said to me, oh, we'll get you over to A&E. There'll be somebody on standby waiting. We'll give you some steroids and, some bits and bobs, and then it'll be a one-stop shop and off you'll go home. Anyway, I arrived in A&E. I was taken in via ambulance and blue lighted when we was almost 3/4 of the way there. And it just kind of snowballed from there, really. Now, I then spent the next 6 weeks in the Lister Hospital. For 3 of those weeks, I had said to the doctors on several occasions, I feel toxic. I feel like I'm going to die. And I don't think they kind of knew to what extent what was going on. So with that, I've lost count of actually of the amount of CT scans, X-rays, and MRI scans that I had whilst I was in there. Oh gosh, that I was like literally pushed from pillar to post. It was continuous at one point. Anyway, the same consultant would come in to see me every single day for 3 weeks.